college, is anybody planning on being a science major at all? Like, interested in some sort of science?
Mine's like science.
Okay. So, you will have to write, honestly, you'll probably have to take some version of a science class, depending on the college you go to. Usually they have gen ed courses. That means general education courses. So, I was a science major. My major is in kinesiology, which is a fancy word for saying, like, biomechanics, anatomy, that kind of stuff. So I had to take a like 101 class, which is like the basic level of chemistry, biology, physics. I think that's all of the lab sciences I had to take. So for each lab science, it's different, okay? So for chemistry, you have a chem lab, bio, you have a bio lab. Physics, you have a physics lab, but physics lab is just doing math problems. So I'm not showing you how to do a physics lab. Today I'm showing you what a chemistry lab report looks like. So nobody taught me how to do this in high school. It's pretty thick. I'm just showing you. This is one that I legitimately did in college. And what I did, I made this front and back. In college, depending on the professors, you might not be allowed to do that. Hopefully, the professor will lay out for you their expectations. If not, your best friend in college is going to be your syllabus. Okay? The syllabus is, or syllabi, I guess I should say, in college, are like where you'll get the information on how to do projects. My professor was kind enough to like tell us how he wanted things formatted. But if not, look into your syllabus, okay? I pretty much am just viewing today sort of like a college seminar kind of how college works. Do you have actual questions that don't pertain to lab sciences? Just about college, since I was there 2 years ago, you can ask me. Because I know that other teachers will be like, in college this happened! And it probably doesn't happen. No offense to those teachers, but like I've heard that you guys were told you write so many papers in college. I wrote less than 10 papers in 4 years of college because I was a science major. So, okay, so lab reports. First page, title page. This is all that this is, okay? This was, like, they tell you the name of the lab. I didn't make that up. And then, like, the day of our lab was Friday at 2 p.m. when it was performed, when we turned it in. That was my lab partner, John. Other hint. Okay, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage because we don't have real chem labs here. So if you have a chem lab, find a good lab partner, okay? Somebody who's smart, somebody who seems like they've had lab before. Be their friend because it's going to be helpful. I'm being honest, we have a slight disadvantage. Our chemistry class is more mathematically based instead of like in a lab where we play with acid and different like bases and things like that. Like I sort of had to learn from nothing. So if you have friends who are smart, that's beneficial. That's called working smarter, not harder, kids. The real like meat of a lab report is the methods, but we'll just go page by page. So the first page, or the back of the first page says the abstract. That's just like the point of this study, the purpose. So an abstract for this lab, they gave us like 5 liquids, and they were like, tell us what is in these. Like perform these different tests to figure out what these unknown substances are. What are these liquids, okay? So I wrote, like the abstract, he was like, it doesn't need to be much. It can be like 4 sentences, okay? Procedure, they give you the procedure. I didn't type this. They give you those things, okay? And the procedure, I believe, goes on for a long time, where it says experiment, all of this stuff. Like, that was given to me, okay? I didn't type any of that. The professor will come in and hand you that procedure, and you have to, like, read it with your lab partner and do the problems, okay? That goes into your lab report. They want you to put the procedure back in there. Why? When they give it to you, I don't know. But they did, okay? So all of that stuff, I didn't type it, don't worry. But you will see that there are, it says pre-lab questions. We're on like, I don't even know what page this is. It's the page 7, it says at the bottom, okay? It says pre-lab questions. right down here. Okay, these are something you just need to look out for. So when they hand you the lab packet, before you go and do the experiment, you would answer these questions with your book, with your lab partner, whatever, okay? So you need to, not every lab has a pre-lab section. Some do, some don't. This one did. So we would just like circle which ones were correct, okay? And then you have the post-lab questions, which I believe were, this is the chart we filled out with all of the stuff that we found in our lab that we actually did, okay? So what we had to do in this specific lab was we had to like mix certain substances to create a reaction to find out what one unknown was. It was kind of like solving an equation where we have like, this is our unknown substance, this is the substance that we know. If we know two substances combine to make this thing, we can figure out what this thing is. Does that make sense? Did that make any sense to you guys? Okay. That's what our lab was, okay? And the labs were relatively easy whenever it's at a 101 level. If you're going into like chemistry, pharmacy, that sort of thing, it's going to get progressively harder, and it's way over my head. But for me, I was able to do decently well in college chemistry and biology with not having true lab experience, okay? So the only thing I wrote on this were the title page, the abstract, and the conclusion, which is on the last page, which you just report your findings, okay? Nothing crazy. But, so this is an example of a chemistry lab report, okay? There's going to be different types for different labs. Like I said, I majored in kinesiology, so I have, in pretty much any college major, especially if it's like sciencey based, you're going to have a class, even if it's a social science. Do you guys know what a social science is? Nice, nobody responded. Social sciences are like psychology, sociology, anthropology, all of those like ology classes, where they're technically a science class, but they're more like human-based sort of things. So those are social science. Even those classes will have something called research methods and research practicum. Pretty much where you create your own research project and then you do the research project. So it's like a lab, but over like the span of a whole year, pretty much. So I have my research project. This is 12 pages from a whole year's work. This is, again, it's a group sort of thing. So this is a little bit different. Like I said, lab reports can look different for different classes, depending on what your major is. Professors will show you. You don't need to read this. I don't care if you throw this out. It's okay. It was just a year's worth of work, guys. I won't be offended. Okay. So I'm just showing you all what could be the different types of things you will be asked to type.
Thank you.
You're welcome. When it comes to college lab reports. Yes. I got a B in college chemistry, so.
Yeah, that shows.
All right, Cole. Let me be real. I know, for no reason.
You say you missed capitalization.
He said you forgot to capitalize something. I don't even know if I wrote that. My lab partner could have written that. Can you pass this back to John? It is. Okay, so we as a group, there's 3 of us, decided that we were going to do a research study on stretching modalities, so static versus dynamic stretching. I talked to the girls' basketball team about this. This is stretching in motion versus stretching while standing still. And it was like this whole thing that we did. So we had to do a ton of research for it beforehand. They made us, it's called a review of literature, which is just as bad as it sounds, okay? A review of literature is when you have to go see what other people in your field of study have done on this specific topic. And it's awful. I'll tell you right now. It's not. I hated it. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Maybe some people like research. I didn't. I did not like it. Okay? So you'll see we had to write in bold each thing. So our introduction was pretty long. this was stuff we all had to write as a group, like together. Like these words on this page was not like the professor gave it to us and we just copy and paste it. This was like, we made this, we wrote this down. So it broke down, methods is how you went about doing the study, like what did we do. So we took, I don't even remember what I did, 20 subjects, nope. Something, I did something in college, I don't remember it. I would wake up, how we did this was, so the first semester was us like planning this research study. The second semester was us doing the research study. And it was me and my friend Luke, who was in the group project with us, and we would wake up at like 6 a.m. to go to the gym to like do stuff with people to do this research. And then we would be there from like 6 a.m. to like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, with going to class, like 1 or 2 classes in between. And then going back at like 3 p.m. to do more of it. So it like took over our lives basically. That's what research is, and if you take any sort of science class, you're probably going to have to be a part of it. Some people also voluntarily are a part of research. Like, professors always are doing research for some reason. I don't really know. It's something about continuing education. So, you can, like, for extra credits, you can go help professors with it. So that's more of your just, like, little lab assistants. But, like, people volunteer to do this kind of stuff. So this is like my whole senior year basically, is all of this, all of these words in here, basically. So we did the methods, we talked about what we had to do, like there's legal things that go into writing a research project because there's like, you don't want to do things that could like hurt people, so it actually has to go through a process called an IRB, which is like you're turning it into a board of people or making sure that it's like a legal thing to do, because I guess back in the day they committed like illegal experiments, like the plot of Stranger Things kind of, where they like did illegal testing on people. So that's why we had to like legally go through some system and say like, this is what we're doing at each session of research. Like these are the steps. We're not doing it, like it's all voluntary. They could quit at any point in time. We're not hurting them, like that sort of thing. How to, in each one, so you see the different types of stretching. We wrote paragraphs for each one. And then it gets to statistical analysis. Stats. You guys did stuff with Mr. Rosio, I'm assuming, in like trig and calculus-ish area. This is pretty much that on steroids. A statistical analysis, they give you like a computer program, and you have to like run diagnostic tests in the program, basically. So that statistical analysis is explaining like, we did this through like an ANOVA type of, I don't even know. I don't remember any of it if I'm being honest. Like how we did, like the types of testing that we did. But it's a lot. But they explain it to you. Don't be overwhelmed. College is a lot more than high school, especially here because we don't have true labs. But depending on the professor, like my professors were very like they explained things well. They were always willing to like go to office hours to talk to them about school or how you could do something, and they were group projects usually, so you always had other people. You were never like just floundering by yourself. And then we get to our results section, which this was just like, you'll see a bunch of charts and things that we had to make. Who's used Microsoft Excel before? You should probably learn how to use Microsoft Excel at some point. You're probably going to have to make some chart or some graph. Like, let me find some. I have some somewhere.
I think that means to come back and teach this.
I need to come back and teach that. Like, I had to do graphs for certain lab reports and things. So you guys, maybe just look into that at some point in your own free time. It's not that hard. Like, it's pretty simple, but I would get familiar with Microsoft Excel, like making tables, making charts, that sort of thing. Because that's how we made, you'll see at the end of this like giant lab report that there's a bunch of different charts and things, or like tables, I guess. We would call it, and at the end of this specific lab report, we had a discussion where we had to talk about like how our research went. What did we learn through the process? Like, was it statistically significant? Did we have actual evidence-based knowledge from this research study, okay? and at the end of the year, we had to go up in front of our whole department and like wear business professional clothing and give like a whole 30-minute spiel on this research study, which honestly, we were working on it for a year. So it was really easy for us to like talk about it. We had to make a PowerPoint presentation and we had to make a board for it, like a research study board. So we had plenty to talk about. There were 3 of us, we each broke down like, okay, he talked about the methods. I'm talking about the statistical analysis. He's talking about the type of stretching modalities. We're talking about the variables, independent versus dependent, all of that stuff. So you have different requirements for different lab reports. Some people will make you do a presentation off of them. Usually when you're a senior, they have something called your capstone classes, which is like your big senior project, basically. That's what this was. This was my senior capstone, where I had to do this big research thing. This ends the same way that the other one did, with a conclusion, just a summation of everything that you said. And then references. We had lots of them. That whole last page is references. That's our review of literature that we had to do. That's definitely the worst part when it comes to research in anything. If you're having to like understand what have other people done in the field first, because I think it's boring. Like I would rather be doing something myself, like going in the lab and like learning for myself, than reading about what other people have done. But that's just me. Other people have different opinions of it. So those are like 2 types of lab reports. Biology is similar to what you're going to get in chemistry. You're going to conduct some sort of experiment, and you're going to have to write something similar to this. So if you take bio or chem, it's probably going to look something like this. In physics, they honestly just handed us a packet for 2 hours, and they were like, work on this math physics packet for 2 hours. It was awful. I hated it. But that's what physics lab was. It wasn't like conducting experiments or anything like that. Because most physics problems, I don't know if you guys have noticed, are like, if you push a bowling ball off an Empire State Building and it travels at this terminal velocity, what is the degree of the air? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So you can't really conduct those experiments. So that's just like using the velocity equations and sitting there with your table and doing the problems. I had to take a ton of lab classes because of my major that were around exercise. So usually a different one, I didn't make this as a copy because I feel like I was giving you guys a lot. But it was just like, my professor literally just walked into the class and was like, there's your lab, do it. And we were like, okay. So we would read it. It's just like, honestly, it's a lot of fluff. It really is. Like, they're explaining stuff that you probably have already talked about in class. So you just really need to go to like the post-lab questions, or like, because it's like explain, this is all just a bunch of stuff that we talked about in school. Like, it didn't need to be. It looks scarier than what it is, I promise. Like, a lot of it is just like irrelevant. I mean, it's relevant, but it's not like, this was the important stuff. It was like, okay, make all of these graphs. That's what these were, okay? Like, record, so it was based off the data that we recorded here. We made graphs for it, okay? So it's more simple than just like, this looks scary, that's a big packet. And like I said, lab classes are always in groups of people, so don't be afraid. I never did a lab experiment by myself. Never one time. It's harder than Mr. Kellner's dissecting an animal. I'll tell you that right now. Just being honest. Like, it's not gonna be just like, oh, cut open this pig and try to name the parts of the body. Like, it's gonna be more work. But it's not unmanageable. I think you're all capable of it. Does anybody have any questions? Thoughts? It doesn't need to be about labs. It could be about college in general. Because I've heard a lot of things about college that other teachers are telling you that might not necessarily be the truest thing. If you're an English major, you're going to write a lot of papers. If you're a science major, you will write less than 10. I think I wrote 1 paper a semester. And it's never on word count. So teachers are lying to you, and they're like 300 to 1,000 words. It's always 3 to 5 pages. Every time. So. And if you're a science major, they don't care where your commas are, or if it's a run-on. They don't care at all. As long as the like in this paper, I bet you there's a ton of grammatical mistakes. Because they don't care. They cared about the content of what was in here. They didn't care about, should be a semicolon instead of a comma and a conjunction. Great. Like you would not lose points for that kind of stuff. If you're in like the arts are like English, literature, actual music, like those sort of things. Those are called art majors. I don't know why. Then they care more about this sort of stuff. Okay? I don't really have much else unless anybody has questions. You guys can just hang out, do your thing. This was just me giving you a seminar of like, hey, this is a thing you're going to have to do in college. Because I guess Mr. Rosio never had to do them when he was in college. He was a math major, so he probably wrote 0 papers. Like, he probably wrote maybe 2 in his whole college career. Like, if you're in the science world, engineering world, you're not going to write papers. If you're in the other worlds, you'll write a ton of papers. So, anything? Everybody's okay? Wonderful. Scene.